Hey, I'm back again. I wanted to spend a few minutes to kind of quickly introduce you to the concepts of aperture speed and ISO. And they all interconnect with each other, but nowadays it's all you have to do is, point and shoot, and it does it all for you. Back in the old days, this is a camera like the one my dad used to shoot with, and here is where you control the speed, how quickly or slowly the shutter would open. This is where the aperture ring is, and notice how it changes this rangefinder thing at the same time. So strange. And then I have no idea what this thing is all about. That's the shutter. Really complex. Although this was state-of-the-art, basic, everybody gets to take pictures kind of camera back in the day. So honestly, I have no idea how there are any shots of me as a child using that camera. This is the camera I first shot on. It's a Brownie, and that's the viewfinder, and it looks out here. That's what you see through the viewfinder, but this is the actual lens. So if you were shooting somebody and you had them all lined up there, you actually had to go up a little bit in order to get there. Otherwise, you'd cut their face off. Oh, I have no idea how I got any shots with this. In fact, there are very few shots. So anyway, let's take a real quick look at, let me size me down here. And we'll start here. Okay, so we're going to look at aperture speed and ISO. And the three of them create the golden triangle. When you change your shutter speed or exposure time, that changes how small or large your shutter actually opens. And ISO refers to how sensitive. Initially, it was how sensitive film was, but now we don't have film. It's how sensitive the light is, or the digital is, to the light. Anyway, it's a little bit confusing, but we are going to walk through it real quickly. And then there's going to be an expert who describes this a lot better than I do. Anyway, okay, aperture. Aperture is how wide open or closed your shutter opens when you hit the clicker. When aperture refers to how small or large the space is that allows light into the camera. It also controls your depth of field, which is really important. So that's depth of field is the area in front of and behind the point where you focus that's either in focus or out of focus. And this is the best. This is always confusing because the numbers don't make sense, but I finally found this guy who really, this is great. The smaller the f-stop or f/number it is, the smaller your depth of field. And the larger your f-stop number is, the more depth of field you have. So those are great shots. So if you shoot at f2.8, you're going to have a shallow depth of field, so only part of it's going to be in focus. But if you shoot at f22, pretty much everything's going to be in focus. And one of the ways I remember this is Ansel Adams. He was in a group called the F64s, and they were landscape photographers who shot at f64, which you have to have a kind of mega camera to shoot at f64. But they did it in order to keep everything in focus. And since they were shooting landscapes, like this shot of Yosemite Park by Ansel Adams, they wanted everything in focus. So everything from that mountain way off in the distance to the dome here close at hand is all in focus. But if you shoot with a small number aperture, you get something different. This is a shot I took of some elderberries out in the woods right before hunting time. A guy drove by and said, aren't you afraid you're going to be hit by a gun? Anyway, so I sashayed out of there. But before I sashayed out, I got this picture of elderberries. And this was shot at an f2.5. And see how the elderberries are in focus, but the trees in the background are a little bit blurred. So here I shot at an f22. So now the elderberries are in focus, but also the trees are in focus. And it depends on what you're trying to get across to your viewer, but how you use your aperture can help direct them. So if you see a side-by-side shot, the shot with the small aperture helps make the elderberries pop a little bit more than the one with where everything's in focus. And notice in this one, the small aperture, is that the leaves are out on the ground are out of focus. The trees are out of focus. The trees off in the distance are out of focus. Whereas in the f22 version, the trees, even way off in the distance, you can still make them out. They're not completely in focus, but they're pretty much in focus. You can use the aperture to make things stand out or disappear. This is a fence, and when you have a small aperture and you focus beyond the fence, then it causes the fence to kind of disappear. But if you want the fence to stick out, then you focus on the fence, use a small aperture, and then the stuff in the background starts to fade away or blur out, and it makes the fence stand out. Small apertures are great to help isolate. This flower stands out from the rest because it's using a small aperture, which creates a shallow depth of field. And, this shallow depth of field makes the gun barrel seem a lot closer because you're looking straight at it, and it's the rest of the gun is all blurry. So that's the way you can use aperture to make your photos communicate more. Shutter speed is also something that can help influence what your pictures say. This is over at Sanders Mill on one of those street names. I went by the other day, it's not running, but this is a water wheel there. And when I shot this so that the shutter actually stayed open for 1 full second, you can see that you're starting to see some blur around the edges of the wheel. When I shot it at 10 seconds, so the camera stayed open for 10 seconds, you can start to see that there's really a blur with the wheel. And I just noticed, look at the flag off into the left side in the background. Look at how it's kind of blurry at the edges there, where it's not nearly as blurry there. Okay, so now we're back to the 10-second one. And so now the wheel and the spokes are starting to blur. And then I let it stay open 20 seconds, and now it's blurring so fast that you can't even see the spokes anymore. And then I let it go 30 seconds, and that let in way too much light. The photo's overexposed because that camera stayed open and it just kept taking in light. So the longer you leave your shutter open, the more light it will take in. So you can use that shutter speed. These are shots that my son took. He loves to go out hiking and taking pictures of waterfalls and rivers. And if he had just used, a camera and done it on program, it would have been just straight water. You wouldn't see the flow of it at all. But because he let the shutter the shutter stay open a little bit longer, you get that blur, so you see the motion of the water going in there. He left the shutter speed open a little bit longer, and that's why you see that trail light in the Dog Creek picture. That's why you see the tail lights kind of streaking off on the road. So it can help communicate things. You can bring action into a still shot. This one, he kept track with the one roller derby person, and everything else is moving. So it makes that feel as though it's action. And the other picture of the race car, what they do is they have the camera up in front of them like this, and then they hit the shutter and go like that. And so they follow the car with it. And that means that the car's in focus, but the people in the background are blurred. If the photographer had just taken a shot like this, then the people would have been focused, but the car would have blurred through. Anyway, you can do some interesting things. Another great thing about shutter speed is it can help set a mood. This is a picture of my door at Christmas time several years ago. And when I went out and used the program on my camera, it automatically put up the flash. And yeah, you can see all the detail there at my front door. But it's not the image I really wanted to get across. So I used speed. Set my camera up on a tripod, and here I shot it at 2 seconds. So the camera's open for 2 seconds, and you start to see the lights from the wreath. When I did it at 10 seconds, you're starting to get more light on the image, and now you can start seeing the door jamb, and you can even see a little bit of a glint off of the metallic wrapping paper of the packages in the corner. Now you can see that even more of the packages in the corner. You're starting to see the other parts of the house. It's a little bit more defined. Now at 20 seconds, the wreath lights up the door and starts to illuminate the packages in the corner. And at 30 seconds, we get a lot of detail. You get the door handle, you see the lines in the siding, you see the doorbell. You can see the Merry Christmas golden wreath holder at the top and everything. And that's the kind of image I was looking for. I wanted people to see what my front door looked like decorated for Christmas. And that compared to this, oh, wait a minute. I forgot I'm so smart. Which one do you like better? I hope you're saying the one on the left. If not, eek. I think it sets the mood a little bit better than the other one. So the problem with shutter speed is if you leave it too open, it doesn't always make for the best pictures. Here, there's so much light that the snowflake lights on my wreath lose their definition. Here, it's not open long enough, so all you see is the snowflake lights, but you don't see much else, anything else. But here, we find that kind of the right balance. You're able to make out the definition of the snowflake lights, but you can see the berries, you can see that it's on a door, that kind of thing. You can see more detail. I will tell you one thing when you're playing with shutter speed, anything slower than 1 second, you really need to put it on a tripod. No matter how still you think you are, you're not still. You're going to jiggle just a little bit and wiggle. So make sure if you're playing with shutter speed to use a tripod or use a found tripod, like set your camera on a rock or something like that in order to make it still. And if you're using like your own phone, then set it up, set it so that there's a timer, and so you frame your shot, hit this, and then take your hands off of it so that it's completely still, leaning up against a rock or whatever, and let it take its picture. And you can get those shutter speeds. Okay, ISO, it's a measurement of the sensitivity of the image sensor. So back in the old days when we had film, you'd get 400 ISO or 200 ISO. If you were going to the beach, you'd use 200 ISO. If all purpose was 400 ISO. If you were going to go shoot a basketball game, then you'd use 800 ISO. But now you can make that adjustment on your camera. and it gives you a lot of different choices. The problem is, well, you can look at the example. When they shot it at ISO 100, the Martini, you got some light, but not quite enough. If you shot it on ISO 320, you got a little bit more light, a little bit more definition. And ISO 800, ooh, wow, we can see lots of stuff. The problem is if you push your ISO too high, your picture starts to get grainy. So that pretty much that's my quick and dirty guide through aperture, speed, and come on, minimize. All right, fine. And I'm going to have you watch a video and then have you play with your cameras and see if you can play with speed and aperture on, if you have a DSLR, it's not a problem. If you have a smartphone, you're going to go into Pro mode, and there's some opportunities. Let me see if I can pull it up real fast. On mine, you go to photo, but then there's more. Go over here and choose Pro mode. Oop. And here, oops, you can't see it. Oh, wait a minute. Here, let's do this. Okay, but anyway, it gives you some choices you can play with ISO and speed, and I'll give you some examples on down the road. Okay, so that's it for now. Watch the video, pay attention, and hopefully we can utilize some of this stuff. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.